When Keanu Reeves steps onto Michelle Carter's talk show, the audience expects a tense but fair conversation. After all, Michelle is famous for her razor-sharp interviews and fearless questions. But tonight feels different. The energy in the room is charged, the anticipation thick. Michelle isn't here for a friendly chat. She's here to corner Keanu, to back him into a question he can't escape. Yet, as the interview unfolds, something unexpected happens. Keanu remains calm, steady, impossible to shake, and before the night is over, it won't be him struggling for words. It will be Michelle. What unfolds in that studio will leave the world watching, and Michelle Carter will never be the same again. Before we dive into this explosive story, let us know where you're tuning in from. And if you love stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, because tomorrow we've got another special one just for you. The opening theme of the Carter Report blasted through the speakers, lights flashing in rhythm to the high-energy soundtrack. The audience roared with applause as cameras panned across their eager faces. Tonight promised to be unforgettable. Michelle Carter wasn't just any journalist. She was one of the most feared interviewers in American television. Her name was synonymous with controversy. She had built her career by dismantling public figures, putting celebrities on the spot, and extracting uncomfortable truths, or at least the version of the truth she wanted to tell. But tonight's show had been marketed as something different. The official teaser had promised the interview that will finally expose Keanu Reeves. For days, the media had been buzzing. The audience whispered in anticipation as the studio screens played a montage of Michelle's most ruthless moments, grilling politicians, exposing actors, forcing confessions. In every clip, she wore that signature sharp smile, her eyes gleaming with cunning satisfaction. And then the moment everyone had been waiting for. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Keanu Reeves. The studio erupted. Thundered through the room, some audience members even jumping to their feet in excitement. Keanu walked onto the stage with his usual quiet confidence. Dressed in a sleek black suit, his slightly tousled hair brushing his shoulders, his deep, kind eyes held a quiet strength. There was no arrogance in his step, no nerves in his posture. As calm, effortless composure. Michelle greeted him with a wide, professional smile, but behind it lurked something more, a glimmer of satisfaction, the kind a hunter has when its prey steps willingly into the trap. Keanu, it's an honor to have you here. Thank you, Michelle. The honor is mine. The audience clapped again. The interview started off light with Michelle asking about his career, his time in Hollywood, his impact on action cinema. Keanu answered with his usual humility, always redirecting praise to his colleagues rather than himself. But then the tone shifted. Michelle leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs. The warmth in her expression faded, replaced by something colder, more calculating. She glanced down at her notes, letting the silence build, then looked up with a carefully measured pause. You're one of the most admired men in the world, she said smoothly, but there's something people don't dare to ask. The air in the studio changed. The audience sensed it. The interview had just turned into a game of chess. Keanu met her gaze completely unruffled. Some say tonight's interview will finally reveal the real Keanu Reeves. Michelle's voice was steady, deliberate. Are you ready for that? A hush fell over the room. The tension was electric. Keanu leaned forward slightly, his expression unreadable, but his eyes held a new sharpness. Michelle, he said simply, if I wasn't ready, I wouldn't be here. Michelle's smile widened, pleased. She thought she had the upper hand. She had no idea that tonight wouldn't be remembered as the night Keanu Reeves was exposed. It would be remembered as the night Michelle Carter made the biggest mistake of her career. The lights dimmed slightly, adding to the atmosphere. The audience could feel it now. Something was about to go down. Michelle adjusted her posture, folding her hands neatly on the table. She had spent years perfecting this approach. Start with friendly questions, lull the guest into a false sense of security, then strike when they least expected it. Keanu sat across from her, still unreadable. I have to say, you've built an incredible career, she continued. But more than that, you've become something bigger than just an actor. Keanu shrugged slightly. Chuckled, shaking her head. Come on, we both know it's not just luck. People adore. They call you the internet's boyfriend, the most beloved man in Hollywood. Some even say you might be the last true movie star. The audience cheered in agreement. Keanu just nodded, his face calm, betraying nothing. And on top of all that, you've built a reputation for being incredibly generous, she continued. She picked up a cue card and read aloud, "You've donated millions to charity. You've given away bonuses to your stunt team. There are endless stories about you helping strangers, treating everyone with kindness, avoiding the flashy Hollywood lifestyle." Keanu gave a small smile as if he garnered you to say, he replied. Michelle leaned in just slightly, her tone cooling. "But you see, that's what makes this next part so interesting." The audience quieted. "You are, without a doubt, one of the most respected men in the world." She let the words hang in the air before adding, "But not everyone sees you that way." Keanu's face remained relaxed, but there was a flicker of something sharper in his eyes. Michelle glanced down at her notes again, then back up at him with a slow smile. "You've always been intensely private about your personal life," she said smoothly. "But recently you've allowed the world a little peek inside," the audience murmured. And just like that, the trap was set. Michelle Carter knew exactly what she was implying. "Your relationship with Alexandra Grant has been making headlines," she said, her tone smooth but laced with suggestion. "People have noticed how different she is from the typical Hollywood type." Keanu remained silent, watching her, waiting. Michelle tilted her head slightly, feigning careful consideration. "Some have even called her, how do I put this gently?" She let out a small laugh, as if she were pretending to choose her words carefully. A very experienced woman. A few uneasy chuckles rippled through the audience. And of course, some have pointed out the age gap between you two. She leaned in now, her voice carrying a note of mock curiosity, which leads to a question certain people have been asking. A pause. A calculated smirk. Is she really with you for love, or is she just an experienced opportunist who knows exactly what she's doing? The air froze. The audience stopped breathing. Even the crew behind the cameras exchanged glances. The tension was so thick it was suffocating, but Keanu didn't move. He didn't blink, he didn't frown, didn't tense, didn't show even a flicker of irritation. He did something no one expected. He smiled, a slow, soft, knowing smile. Then he tilted his head slightly as if examining Michelle, not with anger, not with defensiveness, but with curiosity. He let the silence stretch, let the weight of her words settle across the room. Michelle Carter had just played her first major card. But what Keanu would say next would make her realize she had stepped into a battlefield she wasn't prepared for. The studio remained dead silent, the tension still thick in the air. But Keanu was as unshaken as ever. He didn't rush to defend himself. He didn't argue. He didn't show the slightest sign of offense. Instead, he did something that took everyone, including Michelle, completely off guard. "Michelle," he asked, his voice calm and measured, "have you ever been in love?" A wave of murmur spread through the audience. That was not the response they expected. Her fingers twitching slightly against her cue cards. This wasn't part of the script. "Excuse me," she said, forcing a small chuckle. Keanu's expression remained gentle, yet unwavering. "I asked if you've ever been in love," he repeated, his voice quiet but commanding. The energy in the room shifted. The power dynamic, the very foundation of Michelle's strategy, was beginning to slip. She cleared her throat, attempting to regain control. "Keanu, this interview isn't about me. It's about you." He nodded slowly as if considering her words, then he spoke again. "But isn't love something universal? Something we all experience?" Michelle's smile faltered. For the briefest moment, she glanced off stage at her producer, who was already sensing the interview was slipping away from its intended narrative. Keanu didn't let up. "Because if you have been in love, Michelle," he continued, his voice as steady as ever, "then you know love isn't about age. It isn't about appearance, it isn't about status or money." The audience shifted in their seats, captivated. Some nodded in agreement. Michelle tried to cut in. "Well, Keanu, I think what people are really asking is," but he didn't let her finish. "No?" he said, his voice still calm but now carrying an unmistakable weight. "What people are asking is what they've been trained to ask, because we live in a world where love is treated as a product, a transaction, a thing to be evaluated, measured, and judged. Michelle opened her mouth to interject, but for the first time in her career, she hesitated. Keanu leaned forward just slightly, his gaze holding hers. "But real love, the kind that lasts, isn't something you dissect under studio lights for entertainment." The audience erupted into applause. Michelle sat frozen. This wasn't how the interview was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one leading, the one setting the tone, the one in control. But Keanu Reeves had done something far more powerful than defend himself. He had turned the conversation on its head. And now Michelle Carter found herself in the unfamiliar position of being on the defensive. She needed to regain control, fast. So she did the only thing she could. She pushed harder. "But Keanu," she said, forcing confidence back into her voice, "don't you think it's fair to question things that seem unusual? Isn't it our job as journalists to explore what others are afraid to?" Keanu didn't flinch. "Tell me something, Michelle," he said. She tensed. "Who benefits from this question?" Michelle blinked. Keanu's expression remained serene, but there was an edge beneath it now. Is it the audience? Or is it the industry? The one that profits off making women feel like they have an expiration date? The room was electric. Michelle's carefully orchestrated attack had just been dismantled in seconds. Shh. Couldn't let him take control. Shh. She had to flip the narrative back. And so she made a decision, a risky one, a personal one. Michelle Carter wasn't about to let Keanu Reeves dominate her interview. She was about to take this conversation somewhere he couldn't escape, but what she was about to say might be her biggest mistake yet. Michelle Carter felt control returning to her. At least that's what she told herself. Shh. Hollywood is a place where image is everything, she said, her voice sharp, her posture firm, where actors date models, influencers, people who fit the mold. She tilted her head, narrowing her eyes as if studying him. "But you?" A pause, calculated. "You're one of the biggest stars in the world, and yet you're with a woman who, let's be honest, doesn't fit the Hollywood standard." A sharp inhale rippled through the crowd. A few gasps, uncomfortable murmur. Even the camera crew stiffened, aware of just how far she was pushing the line. Michelle smirked slightly, thinking she had landed a hit. Some people are saying," she continued, "that your relationship is just a marketing move, a way to craft a more wholesome image. After all, it's working, isn't it? People adore the idea of Keanu Reeves, the humble, down-to-earth man who chose love over vanity." She leaned back slightly, waiting for the impact to settle in. Keanu exhaled slowly, not in frustration, not in anger, but as if giving her a moment, an opportunity to take back what she had just said. She didn't. The studio was silent. Then Keanu leaned forward. His elbows rested lightly on his knees, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Tell me, Michelle." Michelle swallowed, her confidence wavering. He was looking directly at her now, not just seeing her, but seeing through her. "What does it feel like?" She blinked. "What does it feel like?" Keanu continued, his voice steady, measured, undeniably powerful. "To sit across from someone and tear apart their happiness just for the sake of ratings." The audience collectively held their breath. Michelle froze. For the first time in her career, she had no response, but Keanu wasn't done. "What does it feel like?" he said, his tone now piercing but still gentle. "To know that the only way you can keep people watching is by trying to convince them that love, real, deep, imperfect love, is some kind of scandal?" The room was shifting again, and Michelle could feel it. She had taken a risk, a big one. And now Keanu had turned that risk back on her. She needed to say something, anything. But before she could, Keanu delivered the final blow. He let out a small, almost sorrowful sigh. "I have to wonder," he said, his voice softer now, "do you talk about love like this because you don't understand it? Or because you're afraid you never will?" Thunderous applause erupted through the studio. Michelle's face tightened. She had lost control. Again, worse, Keanu had just exposed her. And for the first time, she wasn't sure if she could recover. The applause rolled through the room like an unstoppable wave. Michelle Carter, the master of conversation, the queen of turning interviews into spectacles, had just been outmaneuvered in real time. Her audience was no longer on her side. She forced a tight-lipped smile, struggling to mask her discomfort. This wasn't how it was supposed to go. Keanu wasn't supposed to have control, and yet, here he was, serene, unshaken, unapologetic. Michelle straightened her posture, flipping through her cue cards in search of an escape, a lifeline. Something. But Keanu wasn't finished. He leaned back in his chair, his voice still calm, but now carrying an unmistakable gravity. "You know, Michelle," he said, "I've met a lot of powerful people in my life." she stilled, sensing the shift. Billionaires, politicians, studio executives. People who command rooms just by walking into them. People who can buy whatever they want, control whatever they want, bend the world to their will. To their will. Michelle forced a nod, unsure where he was going with this. Keanu held her gaze. But do you know the most powerful people I've ever met? The audience was silent, hanging on his every word. Michelle hesitated, then spoke, her voice quieter now. Who? Keanu's voice softened, but his words cut through the air like a blade. The ones who don't need to hurt others to feel strong. A ripple of murmurs swept through the crowd. Michelle's throat tightened. Keanu let the words settle before continuing. Power isn't about who you can embarrass on live television. It isn't about twisting the truth to fit a narrative. It isn't about making people doubt their own happiness. His eyes locked onto Michelle's, and she felt it. The weight of everything she had just tried to do to him. Real power, Keanu said, is protecting the people you love even when the whole world tells you not to. The studio erupted in applause. Michelle gripped her pen tighter, trying to maintain her composure. She was losing, badly. She opened her mouth to speak, but Keanu wasn't done. He lifted a single finger, a small, deliberate gesture. The room fell silent. Even Michelle stopped breathing. And then, with the precision of a man who had spent years observing the world, Keanu delivered the final blow. You called my girlfriend a gold digger. Michelle's face flushed. But let me ask you something, Michelle. His voice remained impossibly steady. Who benefits from this narrative? The audience shifted uncomfortably. Keanu continued, me? Or someone who profits from tearing people down on television? A stunned silence filled the studio. Even the producers behind the cameras froze. Keanu tilted his head slightly, studying Michelle, not with anger, not with hostility, but with something far worse. Pity. Michelle Carter had spent years building a career out of controlling the conversation, but tonight, the conversation had slipped entirely out of her hands, and for the first time in her life, she realized she had lost. Michelle opened her mouth to respond, but she knew whatever she said now would only make things worse. The audience knew it. Keanu knew it. And deep down, she knew it too. The applause had faded, but the energy in the room remained electric. People weren't just watching anymore. They were witnessing. Keanu hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't gotten angry. He hadn't needed to. And that was what terrified Michelle the most. Keanu Reeves had done something far more powerful than a rebuttal. He had made silence louder than any accusation. Michelle Carter's heart pounded against her ribs. She had one last chance to regain control. She had to speak. She had to say something. Anything. Something to pull herself out of this downward spiral. But as soon as she opened her mouth, she heard it. Applause. Not even whispers. Nothing. A void of sound swallowed the studio. The audience, her audience, wasn't waiting for her anymore. They were waiting for him. Keanu Reeves, the man she had tried to break down, and the man who had built himself back up without even trying. She darted a glance at the cameras. The red recording lights blinked back at her mercilessly, capturing everything. Somewhere in the production booth, her producers were frantically typing messages, urging her to pivot, to salvage what she could. But it was too late. Keanu had made his final statement, and now he didn't need to say anything else. He simply sat there. His presence alone carried more weight than any defense, any argument, any dramatic monologue. Michelle Carter, the woman who had built an empire on controlling the narrative, had just lost control of her own show. And the worst part, she knew it. Her fingers curled around the arms of her chair, knuckles turning white. She wanted to push back, challenge him one last time, but she couldn't. Because if she did it wouldn't be a conversation anymore. It would be desperation, and the world was already watching her fall apart. The silence stretched on, unforgiving, unrelenting. And then Keanu did something that made Michelle's stomach drop. He smiled. Not a smirk, not a victorious grin, a gentle, knowing, almost sorrowful smile. The kind of smile a man gives when he's already moved past the fight. When he doesn't even need to win. Because he already has. And that's when Michelle Carter realized this wasn't her interview anymore. It never had been. But Michelle still had one last card to play. If she could use it in time, just maybe, she could change the story before it was too late. The silence had done more damage than any words ever could. Michelle Carter sat in her chair, staring at Keanu Reeves, realizing, too late, that she had underestimated him. Her show, the show she controlled. The one where she dictated the rules. It was no longer hers, and the world was watching. She needed to do something, fast. With a forced smile, she turned to the cameras. Well, that certainly was an interesting perspective, Keanu. Her voice had lost its edge. The confidence, the superiority, gone. Keanu didn't respond. He didn't need to. The damage had already been done. But Michelle wasn't finished. She had one last card to play. If she couldn't win this battle here on live television, she would take it to the internet. Before the program had even finished airing, clips of the interview were already flooding social media. On Twitter, the hashtags trended globally. Keanu Reeves owns Michelle. Keanu did nothing wrong. The Carter collapsed the moment of silence. The exact second Michelle lost control was being shared everywhere. Some called it the most satisfying moment in interview history. Others called it a masterclass in emotional intelligence. One tweet with over 500,000 likes simply read, Keanu Reeves didn't just win that interview, he transcended it. Meanwhile, Michelle Carter was trending for all the wrong reasons. The internet was merciless. People were calling out her tactics, dissecting how she had tried to manipulate the narrative and how Keanu had dismantled it without even breaking a sweat. Reaction videos flooded YouTube. Podcasts analyzed the interview that backfired. Even mainstream news outlets picked it up. The headlines were brutal. Keanu Reeves stays classy while talk show host crumbles. Michelle Carter's worst career mistake, caught on live TV. How Keanu Reeves turned an attack into a lesson in dignity. This wasn't just a bad interview. This was a career-defining disaster. And Keanu, he didn't say a word. He didn't post a response. He didn't do interviews about it. He simply went back to living his life. And somehow, that made it even worse for her. Because Michelle Carter had spent her entire career crafting narratives, controlling headlines, deciding who won and who lost in the court of public opinion. But this time, she had lost. And Keanu hadn't even needed to fight. The program was hers. The stage was hers. But that night, the story belonged to Keanu Reeves. Michelle Carter sat alone in her office, staring at the screen. The numbers were catastrophic. Her show, the show she had built from the ground up, the show where she had made a name for herself as the fearless interviewer who could tear down the biggest celebrities, was now a cautionary tale. Ratings had plummeted. Sponsors were rethinking their contracts. And worst of all, her credibility was shattered. She scrolled through the headlines, her stomach twisting with every new article. How Michelle Carter destroyed her own career in 60 minutes. Keanu Reeves' masterclass in grace under fire. When keeping it controversial goes wrong. But the internet had already moved on from Keanu's side of the story, because Keanu had never played the game. He didn't do a press tour about it. He didn't post a response. He didn't celebrate his victory. Somewhere far from the chaos, Keanu Reeves was exactly where he wanted to be. Away from the cameras, away from the headlines, away from the people who lived for conflict. He walked through a quiet street, hands tucked into the pockets of his coat, a small, peaceful smile on his lips. Because for him, this was never a battle. It was never about proving a point. It was never about winning. It was about being true to himself. He had always known the truth. The loudest person in the room is rarely the strongest. The strongest person is the one who doesn't need to shout. In her dark office, Michelle closed her laptop. The screen blinked off, but the damage was already done. For the first time in years, she wasn't sure where her career was headed. She had spent so much time tearing people down, believing that was power. But Keanu had shown her something else entirely, a different kind of power. A power that came not from destruction, but from resilience. And deep down she knew she had never stood a chance against that.